Hey everybody, welcome back. This is number 5 in Off Planet Media's Internal Alchemy series, and I have a favorite guest of ours with us today. And I love many things about talking to this wonderful lady, but one of the things I love most is she doesn't like to do video, so I get to do the interview in my pajamas, and that almost never happens. Anyway, Sofia Smallstorm is here, and I haven't talked to her in, it's been a few months, probably 5 or 6 months. And with all of the interesting things going on, we know that Sofia always has a unique viewpoint on everything. And in this case, quote unquote, the virus is no exception to that. So she is here to explain to us what is really going on. Sofia, welcome to Internal Alchemy.
Emily, thank you very much. Look, I'm going to try to, let's just say we're having a discussion. I can't take the, be as presumptuous or pompous to say that I can explain what's really going on. We're discussing.
I was being a little bit, sorry, a little facetious. I was, absolutely. We're discussing. That's all you and I really ever do, is have a bunch of out there discussions about the strange things going on in our world. So this will be no different.
We have on our rabbit hole diving suits and our oxygen tanks.
Yeah. All righty, here we go. Take us diving. You there?
What's that?
Oh, there you go. You just cut out for a second. Okay, you're back.
The virus? What the virus, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're telling us there is a virus that has created a pandemic that is taking over the world, and there are people with symptoms and without symptoms. So basically, it sounds like they have taken the common cold of this coronavirus is a residue that develops in the body after one has the common cold. And gosh, the common cold is called that for a reason. It's extremely common, and it's been with humanity for thousands of years, I'm sure. And so we all have coronavirus in us. And what it does, that's another story altogether. What does a virus do? What do viruses do? And nobody seems to know the real answer. So the term virus comes from the Greek word for poison, because initially when people started looking into viruses, they thought that they were poisons and made you sick. But the fact is that they don't. I have a completely different take on what they could do. So why don't you throw in what you have thought about viruses, if anything?
Well, to be honest, until this all came up, it's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, right? I had, an uncomfortable week when I was 11 with chickenpox. And then other than, the amount of research that I've done into, all the nonsense around HIV and AIDS, I'd say that that's really been the only time I've spent thinking about viruses, other than those of the computer or mind nature, which I think have been rampant for a long time. And on a certain level, this one is absolutely no different than that. I was very fascinated when all this started with listening to Dr. Cowan and Dr. Kaufman explain, a different perspective on viruses, and Dr. Kaufman's stuff with the exosomes. That was interesting. I also viewed a very interesting video that got taken down from a guy named Tom Barnett, who I think is from Australia, where he went into, viruses or, sort of the excretion of toxins, and not something that you can catch from another person. And all, the only way that you could actually truly catch a virus or get a virus would be if it was injected in you. So I've had my eyes opened to the fact that, at least as a general public, it's highly likely that we've been intentionally misinformed or confused about what viruses are. Then there's been some people who popped up and said, well, what about chickenpox? If viruses aren't real, or if viruses can't be caught, then how can people have chickenpox parties? And so, I don't know that I am, in a position to have an answer for that, but it did definitely start me thinking. I've listened to a lot of the stuff that's out there right now and whatnot. And so at this point, I'm not, my head goes to the place of like, well, just like computer viruses, that they have to be sort of created by someone, and it's of course the person who creates the virus then also comes in with the solution. And so I've been looking at it more from that angle, but I'm open to the possibility that we have a complete misunderstanding of what they are. You and I talked a little bit the other day, and you explained your thinking on this to me from some research you've done, and it was quite fascinating, and it made a lot of sense, and so I'm excited to dig into that with you.
Right. So when you say the computer virus is something that we've been conditioned to fearing, really, who gave us the computer virus? Billy Gates.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've been told, oh, you can't let a virus into your computer because it will ruin it, and you have to get antivirus protection. And so we're very used to that. And then the idea of things going viral, meaning they just explode, and the thing is everywhere once it goes viral. We talk about our videos going viral, news that goes viral. So viruses, when Dr. Callan explains and other people we are told, I've heard all different things. They're excretions of a toxic cell, that they are toxins themselves. They're toxic excretions of a cell. And I don't understand why the word toxin is constantly attached to the word virus. So when I started looking into one of the early viruses that people were looking at, it was the late 1800s, and the guy's name was Dmitry Ivanovsky, okay? And I should pull this newsletter out because it was quite fascinating. I'm trying to remember I think it was this one. So just give me a second. Sorry if I have to page through here, but I thought I already put this. Anyway, sorry, Emily, here. Okay, so the first virus and the father of virology is said to be this guy, Dmitry Ivanovsky, okay? And he was looking at tobacco mosaic virus. And he published a paper about the unusual crystal intracellular inclusions on the host cells of tobacco plants that had this tobacco mosaic virus, which is also known as spot disease. So spot disease affects tomatoes, eggplants, the nightshade family, tobacco. It's very common, and the leaves develop these brown spots and they crinkle up and they look stressed and diseased. So Ivanovsky decided that this material that the leaves had on them must have to do with the infectious agent that caused the plants to sicken, okay? And he found that if you took this gunk that was on the leaves and you put it on a healthy plant, the healthy plant's leaves would also crinkle up. So this is where we get the idea of transmission. But now I want to explain to you what I found on the Wikipedia page under tobacco mosaic virus, and it's still there. The heading is different today. At the bottom of the Wikipedia page on tobacco mosaic virus, also known as TMV, it used to say investigational uses, and now it says something else. It's at the bottom of the page. So I'm going to read it. Due to its cylindrical shape, high aspect ratio, self-assembling nature, and ability to incorporate metal coatings, parentheses, nickel and cobalt, into its shell, TMV is an ideal candidate to be incorporated into battery electrodes. Now, who would have thought of that, Emily, right? Taking this gunk on these plants and putting them in battery electrodes. So then it says, addition of TMV to a battery electrode increases the reactive surface area by an order of magnitude, resulting in an increase in the battery's capacity by up to 6 times.
Yep.
That made me think, okay, the virus form, it has its unusual crystal, what did he say? Crystal projections, inclusions. Right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Protein in it, and I thought, if it can amplify a battery's capacity 6 times on its electrodes, it's got to be piezoelectric. It's got to have bioelectrical capability, these virus things.
Yep.
That's what made me think of it in a whole different frame. that viruses aren't excretions of toxic cells. They're not toxic excretions of cells. They're not toxins, but they must be some kind of piezoelectric, bioelectric, energy producing agent in and for the cell, right? So Kaufman, who I know personally, told me that there are exosome receptors on cells, exosomes being the word that he uses instead of virus, because virus is now a very contaminated word.
Yeah.
He says the cells make exosomes and they trade and exchange them. Now we know, Emily, that through the gap junctions, these are fiber optic cables between cells.
Yes.
These are communication channels, and the cells communicate to other cells through infrared light. So we know that if cells can communicate to other cells, what's to stop them from saying, hey, I'm sick, terrible things are happening to me? I know from Zach Bush that cells can ask for a stem cell to come in and replace them. Cells could ask for help. Why can't they ask for viruses as help? If they can't make their own exosomes, then the cells can. And those exosomes are sent on the bloodstream to the ailing type of cells. So let's just go into what inflammation is, inflammatory response, and figure out, track how the body deals with injury or illness. So if you have injury or illness, whether it's systemic, you might have walked into a room and breathed a horrible chemical that was off-gassing in that room. You might get flu-like symptoms afterwards. That's your body addressing a systemic breakdown and trying to do something about it. If you bash your knee into the coffee table and it becomes very big and inflamed and sore and there's a bump and a bruise and maybe even a cut, then your body, that's an acute injury. Your body will also launch its customary inflammatory response. So what is inflammation? Inflammation is simply a process of soldier cells, battalion cells, that come in formation, one battalion after another, and they start doing cleanup and repair. So if it's a systemic problem, you will have systemic inflammation, flu-like symptoms. There may be an area or a type of tissue that's harmed more than the rest, and so the inflammatory process will target that, and your body will try to do repairs. So there are these cells in the inflammatory process. They are in the chemotaxis protocol of inflammation. And chemo is a word meaning chemicals. So the body does its own, let's just call it chemotherapy, chemical therapy. It sends these cells in. Some of them produce histamines, some of them produce antihistamines. Each battalion eats the battalion that preceded it. So it's all very neat and tidy. Eosinophils, neutrophils, macrophages, they all come in a certain formation and order, and they eat each other up, and they try to heal the problem. But what if the rate of cellular injury and death continues to outpace the rate of cellular repair? Then I say that the inflammatory response is the equivalent to calling in the army. If the army can't take care of the problem, then the Navy is called in. So what is the Navy? The Navy, the ocean for the Navy to sail on would be the bloodstream. So the Navy consists of all these different types of bacteria in your body that are crawling all over your organs. They are in your blood. By way of the portal blood, they come out through the gut because there's a quadrillion of them living in your gut. And they are shipped off, because they are the Navy. They're shipped off on the ocean called the bloodstream to the affected areas. And because bacteria are so pleomorphic, they're extremely malleable in their very life configuration. So depending on the tissue they're eating, they could even change their entire shape and type. So if they're eating a certain type of tissue, they might turn from being rod-shaped to cone-shaped, or to spiral-shaped, or to round. So what's happening is the bacteria are literally recasting themselves based on the buffet that's in front of them. And bacteria multiply at an extremely rapid rate. And so if there's a lot of food for them to eat, they eat organic debris. They're helping the army do the cleanup. And the organic debris that they eat, this is why they're called detritivores or decomposers. They are the decomposers, the detritus eaters of the trophic chain. And they are in your body, ready to be deployed when your body has too much organic debris in it that needs to be cleaned. So the bacteria are the Navy. They get to work. They try to help the Army with the problem. But then you might have the need to call in the Air Force. And this is what I think the viruses are. Viruses are the equivalent of the refueling tanker planes. They can meet a cell, and because they're bioelectric and they have these spiky crystalline shapes, they go bump right into the cell, and that immediately releases electrons, because the principle of piezoelectricity is that if a crystal is hit with a mechanical pressure, it will release electrons. So by bumping into the cell, the crystal, the virus, releases electrons, and the cell goes, great, thank you. And its voltage-gated channels open up. The electrons are received. The virus may enter the cell. In virology, you'll read that viruses go into cells. They infect them, and they replicate therein, and they toxify a cell and kill it off. No, no, no. What if the virus gets in the cell and says, hey, look, I can replicate myself. I can give you even more electron generation by multiplying. So now the cell has a virus in it that's replicating, and all this bumping around, this mechanical force going on, mechanical contact, causes electrons to be released. So now the cell, electrons are the fuel of the cell, and the cell's going, thank God, I have all these electrons being manufactured inside me. I can get to work. I can do my basic maintenance and housekeeping and repair. So what's to say that cells that are ill don't communicate through, let's say they do communicate through the gap junctions to other cells. Make me some exosomes, also called viruses. Send them to me with the Navy. I need refueling. So I say the inflammatory process is the Army, the bacterial cleanup process dispatched on the bloodstream is the Navy, and then the airborne, but there is no air, but we're just using that as a figure of speech, fuel tankers are the Air Force. They meet up with the cells, the C-130s and the helicopters, and they fuel them and give them more currency, electrons, that is, for life.
Wow. Okay. So a couple of things came to mind. First of all, that was an excellent description. A couple of things came to mind. What you just described explained to me like a phenomenon that I've experienced my whole life that I've never quite understood. And that is like, as a child, like when I was doing gymnastics, I might have like one day I might have like an incredibly good workout, like with an insane amount of energy. And then the next day I had come down with the flu, almost like my body was given that extra surge. And if what you're talking about, that like viruses are, you know, are these like crystalline kind of things that, you know, like, you know, sort of provide this massive amount of energy that can strengthen battery electrodes or whatever. Like literally, like it happened almost every time. Like I wasn't sick very often as a child, but I remember having like the best workout of my life the day before I got chickenpox, right? And like, you know, I might have a good workout and the next day come down with the flu or a cold or whatever. So that if I'm understanding correctly, that could almost explain that process, which I've always been curious about. I've had that conversation about why that happens to people before, but this could be the answer.
Well, I don't understand how you think it explains that. Tell me what your reasoning is.
Because what you talked about in terms of these crystalline structures, like when we were talking about the tobacco mosaic disease, and that they wanted to use this virus to create better powered batteries, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Those are investigational uses of.
Right. So what I'm saying is when I would be in the process of coming down with something that we refer to as a virus as a kid, whether it be the chicken pox or a flu or whatever, I would often experience in that hours before like the symptoms started to hit or whatever, an extra surge of energy, almost like that crystal structure hitting the battery electrodes.
Well, that's interesting. Now I'm sorry to split hairs here, but I might try to explain that a little different.
Okay.
You had a super workout for whatever reason. You were peaking, you had trained, the coordination, everything came together. It's like having a great day playing tennis, and then your next 5 days that you go to play tennis, you're horrible, okay? But you are saying that you actually came down with something.
Yes. I've had that other thing too, where like, you know, especially later in my career where I might have an amazing workout and then 3 or 4 not good workouts. But with those, like I wasn't getting sick. But the ones where that I had before I got sick would be like superhuman in nature. Like to the point where I was almost able to do skills that I before that point and after that point struggled to do. Like this one workout that was like supercharged or superhuman. And I had a couple of those over the course of my gymnastics career. And I would say that even like in periods of time as an adult, like I think it happened to me a couple of years ago before I went down with a bad thing. I don't get sick very often, where I had like an amazing run. Like I was I ran 10 miles, like 10 or 15 minutes faster than I usually do, right? Something ridiculous like that. And then the next day I was ill and so like, I understand the typical thing of like, okay, you have an amazing workout and then some that aren't so good. This was a far more extreme version of the excellent workout. And then not just a few bad days of workout, but actually coming down with something that would usually knock me off my feet, which didn't happen to me very often. So when it did, I remember it.
Yeah, let me explain that then. So you have this superhuman workout, but that is because you are peaking. That is because we can peak in those ways. And then you come down the next day with an infection. Now what's happened is your body has strained itself, it has called on its resources, and it is depleted after that workout, regardless of how good you might feel mentally that you could do such a thing. So you're in depletion, and when you're in depletion, you need to be strengthened. So when you come down with a cold or the flu or an illness only, Emily, is different because of where it shows up in the body. So I'm sidetracking for a minute, but there's only one disease. Right. And that one disease is oxidative stress to a type of cell.
Okay.
Okay. So oxidative stress means that cell type or those cells in that area simply cannot make enough energy. Something has happened to them. Something has traveled to them. They've got a setback. I mean, it could be your respiratory system because you inhaled something. It could be the cells of your, hip, where you carry your cell phone in a holder for years, and then those cells become sore, the bone cells, and you have to have a hip replacement. That is actually the case.
Yeah.
So when you have oxidative stress, meaning the cells have lost energy and they haven't been able to replenish that energy, you, depending on where that oxidative stress shows up, it could be in tissues of your eye, certain tissues of your eye, it gets a certain name, that's a disease. It could be in tissues of your lung, it gets a certain name, that's another disease. It could be in your bones, in the myelin, it's osteomyelitis. So what I'm saying is the diseases are named based on where the breakdown is showing up in the body, but it's always the same type of breakdown, okay?
I understand that.
So what happens is you go through an inflammatory response, no matter where it occurs or if it's occurring throughout. When you have strained yourself in a superhuman workout, you may have an inflammatory response the next day because you're depleted. You did a super workout, you had the energy to do it, now your body goes, great, now I have to fix a lot of things here. So you're gonna get good and sick, and you're gonna feel terrible while I put my chemotaxis process into motion and I start repairing things. Now, seasonally, we have the sunlight that wanes in the fall, we have more hours of darkness, it's colder, we don't have the same health boost that we get from being out and about in the summer, charged up with sunlight, making tons of vitamin D. What happens is as the fall approaches in the winter, we start going, gosh, my health is not what it is in the summer, and I need to do, your body says, you know what, I have to replenish a bunch of stuff here. So it launches the inflammatory process, and suddenly you think you caught the flu virus.
Right, I got you, okay.
Right? But what you're doing is you're replacing all these tissues and layers, and all this mucosal activity and hacking and spewing is your body dislodging cells, dislodging tissues, the green stuff that you blow out, the yellow stuff, then some of it is pink. These are all different types of cells, tissues that are getting shucked off and replaced by new ones. And your body says to you, will you please not go outside and run around, and don't go shopping, and don't go to school, and don't go to work. I'm going to make you feel terrible because I'm doing some massive overhaul here. So infection simply means that we are on the brink of a hellish repair, and we need that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I believe that the childhood diseases, it has taken me a long time to grasp this, and I don't know if I still fully grasp it, but they are all rites of passage.
Yeah.
They are expressions. They are acrobatic acts that your body is going through, that it ritually goes through when you're a child in order to refine and set up operating systems in these tissues, like the parotid glands with mumps. Those glands have to have an operative reset, and that's called the mumps. And they get swollen, the inflammatory process hits them, and then they heal. And these are not life-threatening. In fact, they're important for life, right? So one question I asked Sherry Tenpenny when she was here in town, and I met with her, you know, Dr. Tenpenny.
Yeah, very familiar. Yeah.
I said to her, this was in the beginning when I was learning about vaccines and this childhood disease. I said, well, do these children actually not get mumps, not get measles, not get chickenpox? And she looked at me and she said, we don't know, because the pediatricians don't even know how to diagnose these diseases anymore. And most of these diseases are so mild that you would hardly notice. Mm-hmm. So she said it could be that children who are taken to the pediatrician and their mother is told, oh, he has swollen glands, that could be the mumps. Mm-hmm. The child who comes in with a rash, that could be the measles. But they don't even know, because they assume that this stuff is gone because of vaccines. So another thing, this is a new way of thinking about it that's very new for me, and I kind of came up with this, was I know from the inflammatory process, and I know, as you know, through orthopedic recommendations, nurses and trainers, they tell you to do the most crazy stuff, Emily. When you sprain your ankle or you have some kind of musculoskeletal injury, they tell you to ice, elevate, and compress. And the acronym is ICE, 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 mm-hmm. compress, and then take the anti-inflammatories. So here's the thing. You just sprained your ankle, and your body has blown up the area. It's made it rigid, painful. And you're going to what? You're going to ice it? Your body just blew up a bunch of blood vessels, expanded them, and expanded the lymph vessels as well. It wants nutrients and rebuilding materials, fibroblasts, protein precursor cells, all the inflammatory process, the chemotaxis cells to go in there and get the job done and have plenty of room to do it. And drainage for the wastes. So now you are going to elevate your foot and drain all that stuff, give it a hard time to swim up there. You're going to compress it with a tight ACE bandage. Why? And close off all the vessels your body just opened, and you're going to ice it and constrict and freeze the tissues so that there's no quick healing. Instead, everything is moving at the pace of the ice age, right? Mm-hmm. What is the sense of that? So then it dawned on me that people who, I know a guy who's had a horrible ankle sprain and break, and he's been icing his ankle for 3 years. And I told him, stop icing. And he said, why? And I said, because all you're doing is you're impeding the healing process. And this is how people end up with chronic problems. This is why the old football injury dogs you for the rest of your life. Because your body tried to fix it, and all you did was get in the way. All you did was impede the healing process because you bound it up. You put ice on it, and you elevated it all the time. You sat for hours with your leg up in the air. So I feel that the body has its own way of doing it. Give it a chance and stop binding and elevating and icing everything and let it get fully healed. Otherwise, you'll have a chronic problem. So it could be that because vaccines are interruptive in whatever crazy way they are, what if, this is just a what if, it's the first time I've ever really said it, what if people, instead of having an acute problem like the mumps, they have swollen glands constantly for the rest of their lives? Or they have rash. See what I mean?
Yeah. 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 No, I mean, that makes sense. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's making me think about, like, I mean, what you're saying about that they just have muted reactions their whole life, like even on a smaller scale than that, like my dad gets a flu shot every year. He still gets the flu, right? But he gets it just for a couple of days. I may only get a flu or a cold or something every couple of years, or every 5 years sometimes, or whatever. When I get it, I'll generally get it really bad and then not again for a long time. So it's that same kind of process that you're describing, right? Obviously now kids are getting all these vaccines that you and I didn't have when we were little. I mean, there was really just a few, and I didn't have a lot of that stuff with, you know, swollen glands or strep throat or any of those kinds of things that a lot of kids have over and over and over. But what you're saying makes sense, you know, that it just makes it just mutes it and makes it so it's always there in the background instead of allowing it to come forward, do its thing, and then move on, be done with it, right?
Right. And this is the thing. If you take cough suppressants, if you stop your nose from running by taking over-the-counter cold medication, if you take Tylenol, which has anti-inflammatories in it, if you take ibuprofen, it has different anti-inflammatories. These are prostaglandin suppressors. Prostaglandins are the chemicals in our bodies that start that whole, they are part of the whole chemotaxis process. And if you get in the way of that, then you're going to do an incomplete job of repairing your tissues. And then you'll get another cold or another flu a few weeks later, and your body will say, see, now I have to do this again because you didn't let me do it completely the first time.
Yeah.
So if you do a proper, like what you do every 3 years or so, if you do a proper, complete healing and replacement of your tissues in your lungs, in your throat, because these are the tissues that meet the outside world. Because you're breathing, you're talking, so your throat, your lungs, your nasal passages, they have to replenish on a regular basis. And you might do a really good replenishment every 3 years, whereas your next door neighbor does a crappy one, and they get 3 colds a year to your one every 3 years.
Yeah.
So you have to allow your body to do the whole thing, do it right, and then you won't have to do it so many times, and you'll feel like $1 million when it's over. And this explains why you could do a very big replenishment process. And then you go out into the world and everybody else has the flu and you don't catch it. And you think you're immune, but the fact is your body said, no, I don't need to replace my cells. I already did it and I did a good job, so we're good. Now, what about contagion? I've been thinking, all right, we know that when your body is doing its inflammatory process, and it's called in the Navy, the bacteria, and these bacteria are eating this, decrepit, gross, fetid, necrotic stuff that the illness has caused in you, that let's just say the injury to the cells has caused. There could be some very powerful agents produced internally as you're going through whatever you're going through. So someone else comes near you and you cough or sneeze, and that person goes home and the next day they have the flu or they have this terrible respiratory thing that you had. How is that? So I had to solve that problem. I had to answer that question. And the answer I came up with was this. It could be wrong. It's just me thinking, doing a rabbit hole dive. Let's say that the efflux that you got from that person coughing and spewing around you was so nasty because they're going through such a torrid repair process. And there are extremely powerful chemical agents in them that are the byproduct of this waste. of this process. Now, I'll just mention, bacteria are kept in check in your body by their own toxic waste. They produce a very toxic waste, and they can't afford to multiply too much because they will die from their own toxic waste. But what sometimes happens is that your bloodstream, the ocean, grabs some of that toxic waste by accident and starts ferrying it all over the body. Now it'll toxify other areas of your body, and you will have what's called a bacterial infection, a blood-borne bacterial infection, also known as sepsis. And you might go into septic shock. And this is what happens in hospitals. Sepsis is 50% of the cause of deaths in hospitals, blood-borne bacterial infections, because hospitals are places where they don't give you the proper nutrients. They'll give you saline drip and glucose. And how is that going to help you? You should be out in the sun, fresh air. You should be getting minerals, vitamins, right? They don't give you that. So let's say you're out and about and some unfortunate soul hacks and coughs and it lands on you and you breathe it in and you go home and you say to your spouse, well, I just caught the flu and I know there was somebody at work, they were hacking, they gave it to me. What I think might happen is that your body says, oh my God, you just gave me a load of really toxic stuff from somebody else. I must mount an inflammatory response because this is very unusual, gross waste that just hit me and I can't deal with it unless I start my own inflammatory process. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And boom, you get sick with something you thought you caught. But it's your body really very intelligently saying, I have to mount the same program now that that other person mounted because you just brought in a bunch of stuff that's really ugly.
Makes sense. You know, like, I mean, it makes, I mean, so it's, you're someone who's got, you know, is sick or whatever, is giving off all of this, like, very, very powerfully coded information that somebody else's body picks up and grabs onto and decides to do the same thing with that information that the body that sent it over was doing.
Right, and it's the presence of certain very powerful chemical, biochemical agents that are in the person one is healing. The healing process produces powerful, unusual biochemical agents. If they reach person two's body will say, well, I cannot manage this intrusion without mounting a similar inflammatory response to what that other person has done.
Okay.
But there doesn't need to be a resonant communication. There could be, but the body might just say, oh my God, look at this. Look at what I have to deal with. You know, it's like muddy boots. Somebody walks into your house with muddy boots. You have to get out the boom and dustpan, clean it, or you have to get out water and call in the carpet cleaner, you know. And they could walk into the next person's house with muddy boots, and the next person has to do the same thing. Only the next person thinks, I caught muddy boots from my neighbor without making the connection of the person who had the mud on their boots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That example. But you mount the same cleanup process because of the waste.
So the waste that is the healing process, not the thing that is causing the problem in the first place. Okay. Right. This is very information dense and a lot to get one's brain sort of around, but it also sounds kind of like, you know, I just said about like information or coded information, right? Like I have a bunch of interesting books or articles or whatever in my house that I look at, right? And there's powerful information in there and I read it and I pick it up and I do something with it, right? The information is here in my house and someone else is in the house with the information, but either they're not reading it or it doesn't attract their attention in the same way. So their body or brain doesn't have the same response to it, right? Like it's still there, they're still in its presence, but some people's bodies, brains, whatever, identify exactly what it is and mount a response, and others it just passes through. Is that right?
Could be, yes. Let me give you another. I too went one day for a glorious 10-mile run. I was staying at a house and she was busy and she wasn't even there. And it was a different neighborhood. this run. So I ran 5 miles in one direction and then started home. And in the 9th mile, Emily, even though I was flying like Superman, I felt that I got sick. I got a sore throat. I could feel it. And oh my God, I just got a cold right now in the 9th mile of this run. How is that possible? Maybe it was coming on anyway. But my theory is I depleted myself. And in that 9th mile, my body went, okay, forget about it. Now you've made me sick because you ran too much. Should have done 7 instead of 10. So then let's say 2 days later, coughing and spewing, I hack and I contribute my efflux, my toxic efflux full of all kinds of crud from my inflammatory response to a friend. And they get sick. But the reason I got sick was I ran too much. The reason they got sick was they were near me and their body said, well, now I have to go through an inflammatory response, right?
Yeah.
Another time, I had a flood in here and they had to demo part of my downstairs and knock out the wall. And I immediately smelled this horrible smell, which I could identify, but I could recognize, but I couldn't identify. And the next day I got this horrible flu. It was just horrible. And this was December, so I thought I caught a flu. And I was covered with a rash. And I thought, when do you have a rash when you have the flu at the same time? And I hacked and coughed for 1 or 2 weeks. It was very, very nasty. It was only years later, Emily, when I interviewed Larry Gust, who's a building biologist in Ventura County. And he said, yeah, people have formaldehyde gas trapped in the walls of their houses. And I went, oh my God, I said it on the air. I said, that's what that smell was. Because I remembered it from high school. It was from dissecting the frog, but I couldn't place it. It was formaldehyde in my walls, right?
Yeah.
And it made me very ill. I had a terrible flu with a rash because my skin got it as well. And so let's say I had gone out of my house in the 2 weeks that I had that horrible flu related to formaldehyde exposure. And if I hacked and coughed around you, you would catch my flu, but you would not be near formaldehyde. You would get my toxic efflux and your body would go, thanks. Now I have to do a big, huge inflammatory response. This is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So it's the same kind of, like, it doesn't really matter what the source is. A particular kind of strain will cause the response.
Right. The efflux, the process of a particular kind of damage,
yeah,
process that results in fixing the damage. The debris itself will cause the same inflammatory response in the next person.
Okay, I got it. Now, and I keep making analogies just because I'm trying to understand it, and maybe this will help other people, right? Sometimes people have their house remodeled because there's been damage to it, and others just get their house remodeled because they want a fancy upgrade. Either way, it makes the same amount of noise and mess.
Right. And imagine if they're doing drywall in the house next door to me, and yesterday they had a huge, big dumpster, and it was full of all kinds of debris. So they had to clean that up. What if they brought their debris from the drywall and dumped it in my house? I would have to get a dumpster as well.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
The cleanup response would be me calling for a dumpster because I have all this debris that somebody put in my house. But next door, nobody put that debris there. They created it because they pulled their walls down. But it's the debris that requires the truck to clean it up.
Yeah.
And the truck is the inflammatory process.
Wow. All right. That was pretty intense. That was pretty dense information there. I know that you well, I don't know if we want to talk about this on this. Never mind. I was going to ask you, I know you talked about this with Dr. Kaufman, and I was curious as to what his response to this was, but I think you have a show coming out with him. Yeah.
He is working on the piezoelectric, bioelectric material, which he said he doesn't know that much about, but I think he's the perfect person. He said to me that what he's exploring is the origins. That's the meaning of forensics, and he's a forensic medical guy.
Yeah.
Origins of viruses. And he said, you're more into the functionality, but nobody has proposed or suggested that viruses could confer energy, creating solutions for cells, on cells. that they themselves, why are they so spiky, Emily? Because
Right.
when they cell, if they're piezoelectric, the ground rule of piezoelectricity is when you hit a crystal with a frequency, it releases a voltage. And frequency can be mechanical pressure or force. So when you bump that virus, those crystalline bits release a voltage.
Yeah.
When you put voltage on that virus, when you put voltage on piezo crystals, they will create a frequency. They will give off movement. Frequency equals movement. So I think viruses being spiky, the corona, all of that is because they go bumping around, and every time they bump, the gel inside the cell, the cytoplasm of the cell, the water, people call it the water inside the cytoplasm. It is not water, it is H3O3. It is a gel form of water, a structured water.
Yeah.
And the most progressive way of looking at cell health is that the mitochondria produce ATP, which is a nanobattery, and it gives the cell our energy.
Yeah.
But the job of ATP is to keep that water in the cytoplasm gel.
Yeah.
If a cell gets sick and it's electron deficient, that watery part isn't crystallized.
Yeah.
It's not in form, it's in water form. So maybe when a virus enters a sick cell, immediately just by entering, it's giving off electrons and it re-gels the cytoplasm. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. This
the part of the cell is adequate for it to continue living and healing.
Wow. This, when you were just describing the whole thing with the spikiness and the virus and the creating electric charge, it sounds very similar to some of the things that I've talked about in relation to sugar, with when the sugar molecules are in your body and the Lilly waves that are in all the environments we live in create like an explosion that releases a lot of energy. It's a very similar kind of thing. I'm very intrigued with this. Sometimes some of this super scientific stuff is difficult for me to understand, that I don't have a lot of like training or a lot of history reading a lot of that. But you're really on, I mean, you've been talking about the piezoelectric system in the body, the crystals in the body for a really long time. And it's part of what's informed how I sort of think about and look at a lot of things and whatnot. And I don't know that I always get it exactly right, but my little pattern matcher inside my brain is, always going nuts when I hear these things and see them as well. But yeah, that sounds right, Sophia. And as we sort of wrap up this first segment, and we go into the second segment, we're going to talk about the 666 patent from Microsoft. That is interesting. But this actually, I feel like I can tie what you're talking about here to that, right? And it would explain Bill Gates' interest in both that technology, as well as making sure that everybody has this particular virus in their body via a vaccine, as well as possibly certain kinds of technology inside to sort of amplify or enhance. So I'm looking forward to sort of digging into that aspect of it with you in the next segment. Do you have anything else you want to say before we wrap up this segment about what we've talked about here? Hello? Are you there? I think Sorry. You're muted. It's okay.
Only that I think we need to consider that the process of infection is an umbrella term. The process of being sick is actually an effort to get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes a sickness can take you down. But really, if you allow yourself when you're ill to recover, and I also want to talk about the pineal gland in recovery, because I think that we can produce massive signaling from the pineal gland if it weren't fluoridated and messed up.
You just sort of, your sound backed up right when you were talking about what we could produce from the pineal gland, so I didn't hear that too well.
Huge neurotransmitters.
Okay.
Gland, but they aren't coming out in our current state of society because we have so much calcification and truncation of all that the pineal gland can do and represent. I mean, in studying neurology, not, I mean, when I say studying, it's not really studying. It's me thinking about, based on something that I read or I'm looking at, and it's the pattern matching in my brain that's going to work. And I really think that is what creates a body of thought in you, a body of knowledge in you, is when you actually use some of that pattern making muscle. And you're correct, but the more you look into things and the more they seem to join up, then you're confirming that your pattern making is doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even like, you know, when I just, you know, I just allow my brain to do that. And oftentimes, even when I don't get it quite right, sometimes I get it exactly right, sometimes a little bit, sometimes I'm mostly wrong, but there's a tiny part that's connected that I was right about that later explains something else, right? So, you know, that brain's ability to do that and sort of like going with that and trusting that process is for me, it's actually what enables me to do any of this, right? So, yeah, that brain, that exercise of working that part of our brains is super duper important. And I love when people start picking up patterns, sequences, repetitive things, and whatever, and being intrigued with it as opposed to just thinking it's coincidence or being put off by it or whatever, you know. So.
Yeah. No. Okay, well, we can move into hour 2. I'm going to pull up an email here that...
Hold on just a second before we do, because I'm going to stop the recording and start again. Why don't you just remind people where they can find you, how they can support you, all of that kind of stuff.
Yes, thank you very much, Emily, for that prompt and for this first hour. My blog is sofiasmallstorm.com, and I've been posting things there probably on a fairly regular basis lately. The rest of my site is a little bit static. I've just left it up for posterity. But my store is the main thing that keeps me going, and that is avatarproducts.com, AVATAR. And there you will find the things that I'm sharing with people that I've discovered that are pretty inexpensive and very, very utilitarian. They all work really well and on simple premises. So I'm an iodine seller. I have 3 kinds of iodine, would fit anyone's budget. Tons of magnesium products, from gel to an amazing cream that is wonderful, helps put you to sleep and rectify all kinds of muscle pains and even joint pains. So, you know, there's this product Restore that's very, very important, difficult to explain, but it really works. Anyway, that kind of thing. So avatarproducts.com.
Awesome. All right, guys. And Sofia always delivers us incredibly dense nuggets of information and things to exercise our brain on. So I'm always delighted to be able to support her in any way that we can. So go check out her sites and join us on the other side for the patron segment, patreon.com/offplanetmedia. We'll see you over there in just a minute. All righty. See you next time.